Fiona, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I've heard great things from our other summit speakers, so I'm excited to get into it today. But before we get started, for those who are not familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you do?
Sure. So in Australia, as I can probably tell by my fabulous accent, so hopefully you can all understand me. Been a naturopath for 25 years. I've worked as a naturopathic physician in Canada. During that time, I worked as a team leader for Dr. Joe Dispenza, traveling around with him for 2.5 years. And I own a supplement company that's in the US, specialized in supporting people diagnosed with chronic kidney disease, so Kidney Coach. So I do a lot of work with that, as well as work with people with autoimmune neurodegenerative diseases. That's probably my specialty area. I do all the hard cases that nobody else wants. So practitioners tend to send me cases they're stuck on. So this is me being retired for like 10 years, Leslie, and I just end up treating other practitioners and the hard cases. So yeah, that's what it looks like for me right now.
That sounds about right. I think that's what I would do in retirement. Just go for harder, complicated things.
Exactly.
No, that makes a lot of sense. My first thought when I heard you saying that was you're probably helping a lot of people, because those sound like situations where people need the help. So today's topic for our summit is weight and wellness, and how you can kind of manage your body, be at a healthy weight and feel good without it feeling like torture, without feeling like you're fighting against yourself. So what are some things that come to mind for you when you think about that topic?
Yeah, it's such a great topic, and it's a big one at the moment, obviously, with all the GLP-1s, and which are our weight loss peptides and things like that. But I think for me, when I'm working with patients that are maybe struggling to lose weight, apart from doing all the common sense stuff, there are key areas that I like to dig into that I often feel are what hold patients back from getting the outcomes that they want. And that is a big one: stress. Chronic long-term stress. We're going to have changes in our hormonal patterns, especially elevated cortisol levels. When your body's pumping out a whole pile of cortisol, it's very, very hard to lose weight. So I have to make sure that people aren't trying to put a great big rock up a hill with these huge amounts of cortisol. And then when we get stressed like that, we tend to make really crappy choices when it comes to diet. We might be fatigued, so getting into the gym can be harder. We can end up with things like insulin resistance. So if we're doing a lot of exercise and things like that while we're super stressed and we're insulin resistant, we often don't get the outcomes at the gym that we need. And then on top of that, we may not sleep properly. So if your sleep isn't working, you're not going to get enough deep sleep, which is where we do our healing and regeneration. You really need good periods of deep sleep to lose weight. And then the other thing that I'm always educating my patients about, and it's often off the back of personal trainers giving wrong information, is it's not as simple as calories in versus calories out. Especially, I run a lot of true age diagnostic tests, and they check for methylation in certain genes, and they will tell you whether you're a responder or a non-responder to caloric deficiency. And most people, especially if you're stressed, if you go into a caloric deficiency, you'll bump cortisol, because that's what happens naturally in our bodies. If we go into starvation, it's a stress response, and so we produce more cortisol, hence the weight loss, and that whole pattern gets worse. So they're the areas that I like to make sure are properly checked off while we do all the other common sense stuff. But often those things get overlooked. So they're my areas of interest, especially in chronic diseases.
Okay, that's great. I mean, let's start with stress, because there's a few areas we could dig into. But it's funny because I think the thought of losing weight or maintaining weight or whatever probably induces stress in and of itself.
Okay.
So how might someone know that that's a barrier for them? And what would you recommend that they do about that?
Great question. So you probably know if it's a barrier, hopefully, if you're in tune with your body. Like, am I getting up in the morning feeling dread about the day? Am I having anxiety? Do I feel slow, tired, and sluggish? Do I have some brain fog? Maybe my immune system isn't working as well, so I'm getting sick all the time. Do I have central belly fat? So is it that around my middle section, it's really hard to lose weight, because that's what cortisol weight tends to look like. You get that middle insulin resistant like weight. And then often if you're stressed, you are generally making poor lifestyle choices. You are generally not sleeping very well. You're not recovering properly from exercise. You might have a short temper and be a bit more snappy. Yeah, and high cortisol will have other things, like suddenly your blood sugar levels won't come down properly. Maybe you've got slightly raised blood pressure. So there can be some metric markers in there as well. But I'm often, again, just getting my patients to go and see their GP let's run a cortisol test. Let's check your DHEA. Let's check your hormones to see if that whole cortisone and cortisol pathway has maybe been disrupted. So they might be the symptomatic ways, and then we can definitely blood test it as well.
Okay, interesting. So cortisol, I think, is pretty well known. It's a hormone, right?
Absolutely. It's our stress hormone.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Okay, what was the second one that you mentioned?
DHEAS. So DHEAS is like a precursor to a lot of our hormones, and then in front of DHEAS is pregnenolone. So that's the pathway in which all our hormones get made through the body. So pregnenolone kind of sits up the top. DHEA sort of sits in the side and next to it. It's a precursor to our sex steroid hormones as well as our stress hormones. And when we go through chronic long-term stress, what our body naturally does is produces more cortisol. And then over time, our adrenals burn out, and then those cortisol levels will start to fall, and that ends up with adrenal exhaustion. But faster than that, you'll get DHEA levels change. So you'll get an elevation in DHEA, and then DHEA will drop down the back end first. So you can tell by cross-checking your cortisol and DHEA levels where you are in what we call the 3 phases of adrenal exhaustion. Phase 1, acute. Phase 2, long-term. And often you can look like you've got normal DHEA and cortisol as both levels start to come back down again. So they've been elevated and dropped down. And then chronic fatigue is low levels of cortisol and DHEA.
Awesome. Okay, good to know. I wasn't familiar with that one. But it's good to know that there's like a diagnostic that you can do. I think stress is one of those things, everyone talks about it, and some amount is ever present. So to know whether you have too much and whether it could be an issue, it sounds like there's some behavioral tricks as well as some testing you could do.
Absolutely. And women will generally feel stressed. They'll become more emotional. It's so terrible. Women are like, I don't paint us that way. But it is, we tend to get more emotional and less resilient. Men tend to get more angry and snappier and short-tempered. That tends to be how that goes as well. So I definitely look at those changes of people like, I'm just not myself. I don't love the way that I'm interacting with people. So
okay, that's funny. That's usually my sign that I'm hungry and I need to eat something, snapping at people. And it's my son has the same thing. I'm like, well, you got it from me. And okay. So you mentioned sleep as well, how stress can impact your sleep and that can impact your weight management. And it's interesting because I don't think sleep, like if someone's thinking about weight loss, at least for me, doesn't immediately jump to laying in bed. But how are those things connected? And like, what difference does sleep even make in this process?
Yeah, so sleep is such an underrated, undervalued thing. Some of the latest studies coming out that if you're not getting a minimum of sort of 7 to 9 hours sleep seems to be the sweet spot, your risk of heart disease goes right up, your risk of diabetes, Alzheimer's, chronic disease, inflammation, they all go up. And they're all part of this inflammaging, stress, insulin-resistant, metabolic type conditions. So sleep is what happens in the first half of your sleep cycle is you get what we call deep sleep. And in deep sleep, it's where your brain and your body flushes all the toxins out and gets rid of everything and does its regenerative healing. In the later half of your sleep cycle, you run the REM cycle, which is your dream rapid eye movement cycle. That's really important for memory because that's where you move your short-term memory into long-term memory via something called spindle cells. So if you're someone that loves blue light and their devices, and you're bombing your brain with blue light before going to bed, meaning you often don't get the melatonin switch pathway going on to allow deep sleep. And if you're getting into bed late because you've been fluffing, it might be an Australian word, but fluffing on the phone, wasting time on the phone, you're going to rob yourself of deep sleep. So you'll get into bed, you might have a very short deep sleep cycle. So some people have, Oura rings, so I track this stuff all the time, might get 15 minutes. And then because they're going into bed after midnight, because it's so late, they're then missing out on that deep sleep pathway, which is where your body does all its repair, healing, and weight loss. So a lot of my menopausal women who suddenly find it hard to lose weight, I find that they often don't sleep very well. And a big part of being able to help them shift and lose weight and feel better in themselves is to improve that first half of the sleep cycle, getting more deep sleep so people are detoxing and are able to lose weight. So again, if you're not detoxing, you're not getting rid of those stress hormones as well. That's part of the detox, is the body will move out some of the stress hormones, some of our genetic pathways. So if we're not getting that, we're not removing those hormones, meaning they're going to have a longer action on the body. They're going to increase insulin resistance and all of those sort of metabolic conditions that stop us from losing weight. So that's why sleep is so, so important.
Got it. Okay. I mean, it certainly sounds impactful, but it's not the first thing I would have thought of.
No, exactly. I always say to my patients, if you're not getting 7 to 9 hours of good quality sleep early, you'll find it very hard to lose weight.
7 to 9. Wow. And what is the factor with early? Because I think that can be really difficult sometimes.
Yeah. So again, it's because you do all the deep sleep cycle in the first half of the sleep cycle. So there's an old, I mean, it might be a Chinese medicine saying, but I know I learned it when I was studying, was that every hour of sleep you get before midnight is worth 2 after. And that's because that's where you do your detox. So for me, I try to get him into bed by 9 o'clock each night. And it means then I know between 9 and midnight, which is where I'll do the bulk of my deep sleep wave cycles, I'm setting myself up for success to get them. If I'm in bed after midnight, and I know because I've been tracking this on an Oura Ring, and all my patients have wearable devices where we track sleep. It's part of when you work with me. That's something we're looking at metrics. So I know how best to optimize people. And we find that people that get into bed late have very, very small percentage of deep sleep. And so they miss out on that deep sleep part because they're getting into bed late. Often been exposed to blue light, which means that your melatonin is not going to work properly. And because they're robbing themselves of the deep sleep pathways, they might get 10 to 15 minutes. Now, you can't detox, get rid of all your stress hormones, reset your metabolic system, and get rid of maybe all the toxins you've been exposed to the previous day if you're getting 10 to 15 minutes of deep sleep.
That's so interesting, because I think a lot of people might assume, or I would have assumed, if you want 10 hours or 9 hours, you can go to bed at midnight and sleep till 9, and it'll be the same as going to bed at 9 and getting up at 6. And it's not. Okay, good to know.
No, it's not. And some people do talk about something called a chronotype. Some people are better at different places as far as being a later sleeper and early riser. But the latest research that I've been looking at is chronotype does not matter if you get into bed late like that with blue light bombing, because you will rob yourself of deep sleep. You're just going to push out your REM, but you're not going to increase deep sleep. That's what the latest study shows. So definitely early nights if you want to get your deep sleep and to be able to detox properly.
Okay, great. And you mentioned some tips already, such as reducing blue light, getting to sleep earlier. What are some other tips that you haven't mentioned?
For sleep, the mechanism for falling asleep is you actually get a drop in body temperature. So making sure that your room's not too hot. I sleep with windows open in Australia, but and depending how hot it is and where you are, but making sure that you somehow have your ability to cool your body temperature. So some people like to have a shower before bed and then get into bed because they've warmed up, but then they'll get that automatic drop as their body cools down from being in bed. So that's one thing, making sure your room's not too hot, making sure your room is dark. So we know that you want it as pitch black as possible. Any lux or registration of light in the room will disrupt melatonin production, and melatonin is what helps us get to sleep at night. It's a really powerful antioxidant as well. So melatonin deficiency can play a role with DHEA levels and stress and all of those sort of things. So a nice dark room. I call it the blue light detox. So no blue light devices 2 hours before you're going to get into bed. Making sure that you leave the bedroom just for sleep and intimacy, not watching TV or reading a book or anything like that. If you're someone that has to get up in the middle of the night to pee, making sure that you don't drink too many beverages before you go to sleep. And the other big one that makes a big difference to heart rate variability and heart rate overnight is making sure you don't eat sort of 2 to 3, at least 3 hours before bed.
Okay, great. And I know for me, because of vitamin E's, I'm aware that magnesium can help you sleep.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about magnesium or other nutritional aspects that might help a person as well?
Sure. So you mentioned magnesium, one of my favorite, and I generally use it in the form of magnesium threonate. So because that's got some really great attributes for the brain. Glycine's very good for improving sleep. So glycine will help. Glycine is tipped to increase deep sleep and REM. What else have we got in there? So there's some great herbs. So chamomile tea can be useful, just depending if you're not having it too close to bed. Passion flower is really good. Valerian, again, you need to just check that they don't interact with medications. Sometimes I am using the hormone melatonin. Great if people do a lot of travel and jet lag. It is a very powerful antioxidant. Sometimes people's sleep pathways or sleep schedules have been so disrupted, especially if they're shift working, that using melatonin for a period of time to help reset that pathway can be really, really good as well. Yeah, they're the big ones. So glycine, magnesium, some of the herbs, L-theanine is the other one that can be very good before bed as well. There's a formula that I use that is magnesium glycine, and it's magnesium theanine form. So it's that you get that double over. So they're the big three major combinations. Lemon balm tea can be really great as well, and that seems to help something called the lymphatic system that goes around the brain, or the glymphatic system, and that helps you detox. So lemon balm seems to help detox that lymphatic system around the brain at night, which is what should happen in deep sleep as well. So they're probably my favorites. And then melatonin, if you are really stuck and need to use it, I do use some of the peptides that help as well, like deep sleep inducing peptide and things like that, if people aren't getting enough deep sleep. And then some of our medicinal mushrooms like cordyceps reishi, those guys can be useful at decreasing cortisol and improving sleep as well, and improving deep sleep and REM pathways as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So you mentioned your third point, the pillar for weight loss, that it's not as simple as just calories in, calories out, which I made a note, calorie math. It's logical. You know, your body runs on calories. So it's like put as much gas and burn more, and then you'll lose weight. But it doesn't always work like that. I'm sure a lot of people listening know that. But tell us why.
Well, yeah, it's a great question. So it's partly genetic. So again, when I'm running true age tests, it will actually tell us whether you have the gene loci that's called a responder or non-responsive to calorie deficit. As I mentioned too, that if you put yourself in long-term calorie deficit to lose weight, you'll bump up cortisol. So if you're someone that's already stressed and it has a metabolic condition, i.e. insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, any sort of inflammation going on in the system, and then you starve yourself, you're going to increase that cortisol and insulin resistance, meaning it's going to the body goes into that starvation fear mode, and it just stores everything. So the more that you do calorie restriction, the more you actually play a role in what your cortisol levels are up to. So you start to get into a snowball with that. The other problem is hormones. You know, we've got thyroid function that we need to look at. Some people actually, when you increase their caloric intake, that gives them enough energy for their body to heal and lose weight. So sometimes it's just actually people need more and different types of their macros. So whether it be protein, carbs, and fats, everyone's designed a little bit differently. So some people will lose weight on a ketogenic fat diet, and other people, especially if there's something like an APOE4 genes, with that type of diet, it's just not going to work for them. They might need a little bit more protein. And then there are other people that actually do well with a little bit of carb balancing in there. So it's so individual when it comes to that sort of stuff. You know, I'm thinking of patients at the moment that I've got one at the moment who just needs to lose 20 kilos and eats like birdseed, doesn't eat much. And I'm like, you're actually not eating enough for your body to recover and repair the metabolic issues, which is what needs to happen for you to lose weight. So it's that fine line of making sure that the body has enough nutrients and nutritional valued foods, or high nutrient dense foods, that it can repair and heal, and that then it's got actually the fuel to lose weight. And it's that old starvation, comparison that we used to make, that if you starve the body, it does think it's going to starvation mode, and so it'll just hang on to calories, so it's harder to burn them.
Yes. Without the first speaker to talk about that you might almost have to increase your food intake in the beginning. Yes. To get yourself out of that. And I can relate to that, because I think for me personally too, if I feel restricted, then I am even more obsessed with what am I going to eat. I'm thinking about food. I want to eat all the food, or I eat something unhealthy because I'm just hungry and I give in, versus if I have a more nourishing meal, it sustains me, if you've got the fiber and the protein. But that's really interesting, and I think a little bit counterintuitive for folks.
Yeah, it really is. And yeah, lots of people are just told they've been lazy, eating too much, and they need to go and exercise more. And actually that whole thing will just bump the cortisol stress pathway for some people that maybe aren't fit or cardiovascular fitness. So when they're starting to exercise again, it's stressful. So they're going to bump more cortisol. then they're told to starve themselves, pumping more cortisol, and then they wonder why they don't lose weight, and then they give up. And it's just that wasn't tailored for them. And that's tough, because it's not like some people don't give it a crack, or they lose weight very quickly, then their body readjusts, and then they just pile it back on, and then it becomes very hard to lose because the body's gone into that self-preservation mode.
Yes, I can see that. I think the other theme I'm getting from this conversation, as well as some of the other speakers, is, we don't have to fight ourselves. Anything that makes you feel bad or kind of beat yourself up or whatever is probably the wrong direction. It's like, love your body more, don't beat yourself up if it's not working. Just try to figure out what's not working and all of that.
Absolutely. And, for some people, I'm thinking of my sister, she was personal trainer, went through a whole pile of stress, a whole pile of things happened, probably a bit of post-traumatic stress from work, put on a lot of weight. Now, she was someone that was always super fit and healthy, and it was the same thing. And it took a long time, but it's been sustainable. So she lost sort of 40 kilos, but it's been done slowly and sustainable, and it's been off for 3 years. She looks darn amazing, let me tell you. But it's been because it was done slowly and done in a way that her body could do it. And now it's stayed off, and she's got all her muscle back. She's feeling good about herself. And a big part of it was to give her permission to do it slowly. So she started to fall in love with her body and herself again. And that's been the most rewarding part to see, versus the weight loss aspect of it. And now, because she's so much more in tune with her body and the stress levels, it's stayed off. So she doesn't have to do 50 million things. It's now she can just do the diet, and her metabolism has reset itself, versus us doing this fight and the war against metabolism and starving her and all the things that weren't working for her because she tried them. So I definitely see it works, and it might take a bit longer, but it feels like a more holistic, loving, like to your point, a gentler way to do it, to give you long-term effects, not just short-term.
Yes, no, that's great. It just seems like easier, and also like it makes sense.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much. I'm sure there are a lot of people that have heard what you've talked about that are interested in learning more about what you do, or maybe consulting with you. So can you share where people can find you?
Sure. If everybody heads to www.kidneycoach.com. We've got our big main website up there, and then you'll find us on socials under the same. And then I've got a YouTube channel as well where I do a lot of podcasting. It'll be Kidney Coach as well. And then all the contact details that go through the team there in the US, they'll just let me know.
Thank you so much, Fiona. It was fun chatting with you.
You too. Thank you.